It is a truth universally acknowledged that a reader in possession of a good library must be in want of a Pride and Prejudice retelling. The 2005 movie version of Pride and Prejudice came out 20 years ago, and I've seen some people do some fun recreation videos, and I've also heard of some people going to some special showings in the movie theaters. And while it's not my favorite version of Pride and Prejudice, I've just been feeling drawn to Regency romance, and I really want to hark back to Jane Austen's work. One of my goals for this year in my reading is to read more classics, and I really want to reread Pride and Prejudice since it's been at least 7 years, if not longer than that, since I've last read it. And I'm just really in the mood to embrace all things Regency. So I'm gonna take you along with me as I read not only Pride and Prejudice, but also a handful of retellings, and see what I love about the retellings that are out there, and to kind of, I guess, understand more about what I'm looking for when I'm looking for a retelling, since Pride and Prejudice is a classic for a reason. I also have a couple other fun activities that are Pride and Prejudice adjacent. I mean, of course, we're gonna watch the 2005 movie. I have a puzzle I recently got that's Jane Austen themed that I'm really excited to work on. And I even have some yarns that are Pride and Prejudice related. So we'll probably do some kind of a knitting or crochet project intermix. And we're just gonna do a fun Pride and Prejudice extravaganza type of vlog. My costume is not entirely historically accurate, but this is like the best I could do with 50 bucks. I made this fichu myself, so I'm proud about that, just to add a little bit more modesty. I was not gonna cut my hair to do like the cute wispy bang look, but I did put my hair up. It's not my business what the back looks like right now, but I just bought this like really cute comfy dress. Honestly, the Empire waistline for Regency dresses works out great with my pregnancy bump, and I'm just enjoying vibing. I am no expert, I'm just having fun, but if you particularly love historical recreations, definitely share down below what you love to see, what you're looking forward to. Let's hop right into this vlog. I don't know why, but I've had Pride and Prejudice on my brain for a while now, and I've just seen a reminder that the 2005 movie version of Pride and Prejudice, the one with Keira Knightley, came out 20 years ago, which is wild to imagine. So people have been seeing that show in movie theaters again, which is a really fun thing to be able to kind of throw back to that. So I feel justified in my recent obsession with Pride and Prejudice, and I want to share it with you in a little Pride and Prejudice extravaganza. So I have compiled a list of 8 books that I want to read that are either the original Pride and Prejudice book by Jane Austen or are inspired by it, to kind of, I don't know, compare, contrast, explore a wide variety of adaptations to the classic story that I know and love, and to just talk about them and see if any of these interesting adaptations are worth recommending to you. On that list, I've got the original Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. I've got Pride and Premeditation by Tirzah, which is a young adult mystery. I've got Pride and Prejudice in Pittsburgh by Rachael Lippincott. I think this is a sapphic romance. I don't know if it's a YA or not. I have to double check on that. Pride and Prejudice and Zombies, which is honestly a classic adaptation I've heard a lot about. This is by Seth Grahame-Smith, so got some sci-fi elements to it. Most Ardently by Gabe Novoa, which is a, what's the opposite of sapphic? Which is a YA gay romance. And then Pride and Prejudice and Other Flavors by Sonali Dev. And this is like an Indian adaptation. This is the longest one, so I may or may not get to this because I don't know if I want to read a 15-hour audiobook. We'll see if we get to it. Then Pride and Protest by Nikki, Payne. And I think this book might be set in Harlem, also by an author of color. And then finally, Pride and Prejudice in Space by Alexis Lampley. So this has some sci-fi elements too. I really don't know a lot about all these. I tried to grab a variety of different adaptations of Pride and Prejudice so I could explore a lot. I don't have any of these books on my TBR right now, and even Pride and Prejudice, I've read before, so it's not on my TBR shelf in the same way that all my unread books are. So I'm not going to improve my TBR numbers at all through this video. This is just a fun time. I want to watch the movie. I want to read the original book again. I want to try out all these different adaptations. I have a Jane Austen inspired puzzle that I want to work on maybe while I'm watching the movie or listening to some of these audiobooks, and just enjoy Pride and Prejudice because I'm really in the mood. I don't know why. I'm in my Regency era. So the only physical book I have to represent this video is my copy of Pride and Prejudice. When I saw this really cute version, I decided to get it. It is from Page Publications, and if you look, all of Jane Austen's works have these really cute covers that coordinate. The only problem is the spine is backwards, so it says Pride and Prejudice going up. So if I were to lay it with the right side of the cover up, it looks upside down, and that really bothers me. But the cover is really cute. It's a box set of all of her works, and I've read Pride and Prejudice and I've read Emma, and I want to read the others, so I'm trying to get through them probably this year. Hi, Alfred. Look at him snuggling. So I'm trying to get through a lot of classics this year, so I'm hoping to get through a lot of Jane Austen's works. I'm gonna put this on my things that I'm currently reading or working on right now, right here. And then we'll come back to that when I probably get to the end, because it's a very classic story. It's a very common story. I don't have a ton to say about it right now other than I've read it twice before, and I'm really excited to dive in again.
It is a truth universally acknowledged that a single man in possession of a good fortune must be in want of a wife. With the Gardiners, they were always on the most intimate terms. Darcy, as well as Elizabeth, really loved them, and they were both ever sensible of the warmest gratitude towards the persons who, by bringing her into Derbyshire, had been the means of uniting them.
I just realized that I've never updated you on finishing Pride and Prejudice. It was so good to come back to this story, but I'm pretty familiar with the story, and so re-listening to it was just such a fun way to start off this video, be reminded of the moments in the story that I love, even to remember the things that I love from the movies themselves, because I have watched the 2005 version and the BBC version in the past, and I like both versions for different reasons. But I was able to finish this, and I think my final rating is probably going to be a 4.5. I think it's a really good classic. It's got some really good banter, humor, drama. I think there's a really interesting balance of where the story goes and what happens to these characters, and there's some really good one-liners. This story isn't as approachable because it was written in the early 1800s, but the more you're familiar with this type of wording and the way these characters interact, the funnier things turn out as you are understanding a little bit more the context of what these characters are saying and the nuances of what they mean. I think the only thing that's missing for me from Pride and Prejudice, I really wish we got more of Darcy's perspective, especially as he is undergoing some internal changes and considerations. You see more of it from Lizzie's perspective for sure, but I would have loved a little bit more from Darcy's character as far as seeing those changes and that growth in him and seeing how his perspectives of Lizzie changed over the course of the book. Because we had a couple different pivot points in the way he saw Lizzie throughout the story. And I would have loved a little bit more about that. But other than that, it's such a good story and has a little bit of everything, as long as you're not looking for like an action sequence like my husband was. I'm glad I was able to finish that. It was a really good way to start off this video and get reminded of the story, and I hope that I can look at all these future books that are based off of Pride and Prejudice and then see some similarities, some differences, understand what these other authors are pulling from the classic to integrate into their own version of the story. I think that this was important for me to start with this book. So I'm glad I finished that. I also was able to watch the 2005 version of Pride and Prejudice with my mother-in-law and my sister-in-law. My sister-in-law had never seen it before. So we watched most of it, at least half of it, and I was able to get started on my puzzle, which was fun. I'm glad I was able to make some progress there. And I have this like puzzle mat, and so I was able to set it up there and then just fold it away when I had to leave my in-laws house, so I can pull that out and work on it again. I need to borrow that movie from my in-laws when they're done with it so I can finish watching it maybe in a week or two. We'll see kind of what time I can do that, but I plan to work on the puzzle some more and to continue watching that movie. Glad I was able to get started on that. Now that we've read the classic, let's jump into some of our recreations or remixes, remakes of the Pride and Prejudice story. Hello, it is another day and we are still reading versions of Pride and Prejudice. I'm working on Pride and Premeditation by Tirzah, and I am about 15% of the way in, a little over an hour. Listen, it's a pretty quick read, a little over 8 hours total, which I love. That's not going to take me too long to get through. And today I'm doing a lot of driving because I already drove this morning up to a fundraiser event for our outreach and like community teaching opportunities that I am working with for my job at the hospital. And so now I need to drive back home. It'll be a little ways, so I'll get a lot more reading done. But just giving you a little update on this book. It is a YA mystery where it's interesting to see all these characters that I'm familiar with, and all of them are distinctly different personality-wise than the original story, but they all have kind of a tie-in personality-wise. Like, they're not identical characters and they're not even very, very similar. They're just kind of similar. And so there's definitely been a lot of liberties taken, which I think I kind of like, that the author isn't trying to adhere so closely to the original story that it is distorting the story this author is trying to write. So there's a lot of differences. The main plot is Lizzie is 17, so a little younger than the original story, and she wants to work for her father. He is a barrister or a solicitor, basically a lawyer if you're not familiar with other countries' terms, and he owns Longbourn and Sons, but there's no sons. So Mr. Collins is then the next heir for this family company. It seems like it's still set in the 1800s, though it feels like a little bit later than the original series, maybe closer to like 1840s, 1850s, but I really don't know for sure. Just the feeling I'm getting from it. And so Lizzie wants to work for her father, but it's not very proper to do so. And so she's just told that she needs to prepare to be a wife, but she really doesn't want that path. She really wants to become a solicitor and hopefully one day a barrister. So in her attempt to do that, she's trying to solve crimes and kind of gather evidence to help her father's cases. And the latest issue that is happening that is kind of the instigator for like her last chance to really win her father over is Mr. Bingley has been accused of murdering Mr. Hurst, who is Mr. Bingley's brother-in-law. So you really don't hear about Mr. Hurst very much in the original story. So it's kind of funny that he is like the main murderer. So Mr. Darcy is a family friend, and he is trying to help Mr. Bingley get acquitted because he doesn't think he actually did it. It seems like Mr. Darcy isn't doing a lot to gather evidence and prove that Mr. Bingley didn't do it. Whereas Lizzie is trying to, ask questions and find out what's going on. So it's kind of fun to see these two characters clash a little bit. And it's also interesting to see kind of at certain points of the story where in the original, like, oh, now we're meeting Lady Catherine de Bourgh. In a similar spot in this story plot, we're also running into Lady Catherine de Bourgh, though her character is very different. So it's just a very interesting feel, but I'm like, oh, we're meeting someone new. I bet it's so-and-so. And I'm right, because I'm just following along in when characters are introduced in the original story is kind of when they're being introduced in this story. So it's kind of interesting to see that. So I'm excited to keep reading and learn more about this suspect and who actually did it. I'm going to say Mr. Wickham just because we don't trust him, but who knows for sure. Hello. It is much later in the day. Sun is starting to set, so lighting is very different. Between all the driving I've done today with work and errands and things like that, I just barely finished Pride and Premeditation by Tirzah, and I really enjoyed it. I still have to think about my rating exactly, but I'm in the 4.25 rating. It is a really fun YA mystery. I really liked the liberties that the author took with each of the characters. I felt like they understood the base of each character, but extrapolated like in different circumstances, in, you know, different demographics, different settings, how these characters would be different than the characters we know from the original Pride and Prejudice. So I feel like there was a lot of really good connections and parallels, but it wasn't like just trying to retell the story. It was a very different story. I also loved seeing like the twists and turns and like who was a culprit and who was not. I found that really fun. I was missing the romance between Jane and Bingley, but you can't have everything in a retelling like this. In general, I really, really liked it. I will definitely talk about it more once I think about it, but it was just a really fun historical mystery with spins on all the characters I'm familiar with that just kept things fresh and different. I'm not sure if I would have liked it more if it wasn't related to Pride and Prejudice at all, like all the characters were unique and different. It would have definitely been a different reading experience if the characters were all completely new to me. But I liked the little Easter eggs. There was a couple fun lines in there. We still got a proposal from Mr. Collins. You know, there were some things in there that were the same. They were just really fun to catch when I was reading this book. I definitely want to read more books in this series. And I really liked how the author at the very end had a little note about the historical discrepancies, especially with like Lizzie working outside the house, wanting to be a solicitor and then a barrister and all that. Women wouldn't even attend school to become a solicitor until like the 1870s. And then I think the first woman who passed the bar wasn't until like the early 1900s. So this is like very out of historical context, but apparently it is still set in the early 1800s. 1813 is when the original Pride and Prejudice is set, and so that's what the author's aim was, but she wanted to take liberties with a lot of the historical aspects to just put these characters in different circumstances than they normally would. So I found that really fun, and I'm really grateful that the author included that note because that was one of my hesitancies about this book. The next book I'm going to read is called Pride and Prejudice in Pittsburgh, and this is a YA LGBTQ plus romantic comedy. So we'll see what happens. It sounds like it'll be related to Pride and Prejudice, but looking even through the names of the characters, they'll be very different. So I'm curious to see what the connections are between the original classic and this story. It's another short book, not too long, so we'll get started on it tonight, and I'll probably talk to you tomorrow or the next day, kind of giving you an update on my thoughts on it.
Hello. You can probably hear, but I am sick. It hit really fast after the last clip. I was really tired that day, and I thought it was just being up early, being out and about, helping with that 5K fundraiser, whatnot, but definitely was coming down with something. So yesterday I did a lot of resting, sleeping, just taking it easy. Today I'm feeling a little better, so I think the rest is helping, and I want to just have another relaxing day today. So I'm going to be listening to more of Pride and Prejudice in Pittsburgh by Rachael Lippincott while I work on a diamond painting that has been bringing me joy. And from what I'm looking at, it seems like this isn't even a retelling of Pride and Prejudice. Though I feel like with a title like Pride and Prejudice in Pittsburgh, it really should. So I'm hoping that I see some themes or maybe some like little Easter eggs. I'm really hoping I do. If not, then this is a little bit pointless for this video.
Okay, I am feeling really wiped out, so I'm going to take a nap. And before I sleep, what I like to do in bed, either at nighttime or before I nap, like before a night shift or today because I'm not feeling well, is I like to read on my e-reader. I have a Kindle. It's a few years old now. I'm not exactly sure how old. It's like 2 iterations of the Kindle Paperwhite ago, so it's a little bit older. But I want to read Pride and Prejudice and Zombies, which seems like, because the authors are listed as Jane Austen and Seth Grahame-Smith, I think is the name. It looks like it's going to have a lot of actual prose and dialogue from Jane Austen's original Pride and Prejudice. So I am excited that I already read the original just as a refresher, and now I can look at this one. It looks like it'll be a lot shorter, so it should be a fairly fast read, but I
I don't know, Pride and Prejudice and zombies as a concept sounds like it's gonna be funny and maybe horrific, and I'm not quite sure if that's how it'll play out, but I wanted to read you the first line because I think this may be setting the tone for the entire book. It says, "It is a truth universally acknowledged that a zombie in possession of brains must be in want of more brains." So I do genuinely hope that this is just a funny, plucky, and maybe slightly horrific read. So we're going to do some reading in here, and we'll touch base when I know a little bit more about what's going on and how this differs from the original. I enjoyed a nap, and now I'm on my way to pick up my daughter, and I have finished one book and started another audiobook-wise. So I finished Pride and Prejudice in Pittsburgh by Rachael Lippincott, and yeah, I will do a little digging, but I don't think it's necessarily inspired by Pride and Prejudice at all. My next book is called Most Ardently by Gabe Novoa. I think I got the name right. And this is also queer, and it is also YA, but it is specifically a Pride and Prejudice remix. This is the story of Oliver, who is, I don't know the best way to talk about this without being triggering, but the character that we consider the second oldest daughter of the Bennet family feels more comfortable as a boy. I'm trying not to use like a dead name or anything. So he goes by Oliver, but not everyone knows that this is how he feels and what makes him most comfortable. So he has some trusted few, like his friend Charlotte and his sister Jane, and a couple people like that. But he's trying to navigate. He's 17, so a younger character, trying to age down these classic characters. Oliver is trying to come to terms with not necessarily how he feels, but how he interacts with the world, since he's not in a community where he can just tell people that he is a boy and how he wants to live his life and how he's most comfortable. That is also hard in our day and age, but especially so in the early 1800s. And so he is trying to find his place. He has made friends with Mr. Darcy and Mr. Bingley. Mr. Darcy definitely acts different around Oliver when Oliver is acting like the boy he is versus when they were at a ball and Oliver was dressed as a girl per his mother's request. It's just a really interesting dynamic, and I mentioned triggering. I could definitely see how for some people this could be really triggering, even though the author, I get a sense, knows what this is like and is trying to tell the story genuinely. And the author had an author's note about this as a triggering circumstance. And so just be mindful of that, especially with use of dead names and things like that. So even for me, it's really hard to see Oliver's struggles as he has found comfort within his own identity and who he is as a boy and who likes boys, but also feeling really out of place in society and not feeling comfortable coming out to everybody. So I'm excited to see kind of where this goes and what happens. I'm assuming he and Darcy get together, but I really don't know, because again, this is a YA, so I'm not sure exactly to what extent things will go. I like the writing style, and I think that this is an important message for people to read and to understand our trans brothers and sisters and what they are experiencing, not just in their identity, but also in how their identity fits in the world at large. I think that's really important. So I'm excited to keep reading. It is another short book. It's like a 7.5 hour audiobook. And so I'm already 15 or 20% of the way in, and I should finish within the next day or so. Finally got around to finishing the movie and finishing the puzzle. My husband helped me a lot with it. So we finished just in time that I can enjoy watching Mr. Darcy walk up to Elizabeth and the whole asking for her father's permission and whatnot. I don't know what it is, but Donald Sutherland is just such a good Mr. Bennet that scene just hits me right in the feels when he realizes his daughter is really in love. Oh my gosh, sorry. Really happy to have finished the movie, finished the puzzle, and we'll get back to reading tomorrow some other Pride and Prejudice remixes. Maybe I'll get a chance to watch some of the BBC version soon. I would love to revisit it, though it is a lot longer, so we'll see what I have time for. Good morning, it's another day. My family is coming into town. I'm really excited. So that means that I have a lot of chores to do around the house, which means a lot of listening to Pride and Prejudice remixes. I think it's really fun reading so many different versions back to back and seeing the same scenes or similar scenes play out. And right now, actually, in Pride and Prejudice and Zombies, I'm in the same spot within the original story as I am in Most Ardently. We're right now in the scene where Caroline Bingley is trying really hard to get Darcy's attention. He's pretty much ignoring her. So then Caroline decides to take a turn about the room and invites Elizabeth, or in this case, Oliver, in Most Ardently, to take a turn with her. It's just really funny to see like all these parallels and what certain authors choose to do to make the scenes different from one another and like what their focus is in kind of an iconic story. So that's been kind of fun to listen in on. I would not be surprised if I finish Most Ardently today because it's such a short book, but we'll see kind of what we get through before my family comes to town. All right, so I finished Most Ardently and I liked this book. I felt like the struggle that Oliver faced was really important, and I really appreciated the way that story was told because I haven't read a story like it. I feel like a lot of times trans YA stories show people who are discovering their identity, not people who already know their identity and feel comfortable in their identity and are on their way to coming out to everyone around them. I found that the timeline of things was interesting in that way. I had a few issues with like the plot and the characterization, just some holes that I feel like maybe a longer story or a more fleshed out story could have done a little bit better. But in general, I like this a lot. I think I'd rate it somewhere maybe in the like 3.75 range. In general, I enjoyed it, but didn't quite hit for me in the way I was hoping to. I think just because of all those like plot and characterization holes that I was seeing, but there were some interesting flips that this author did compared to the original story, which I appreciated. I am going to keep working on Pride and Prejudice and Zombies as an ebook, and then probably in a few days I'll come back to another audiobook and we'll talk about that more, but I have some other things I want to work on in the meantime, so we will fast forward to the future where we continue on in this video.
This video wasn't intended to be a book and yarn vlog, just because I'm not just reading Pride and Prejudice and then just making a Pride and Prejudice themed project, but I'm in the mood to cast on something and I have some sock needles available, so I have an idea. But I did want to show you all of my Pride and Prejudice themed yarn that I have because I bought the Pride and Prejudice club from Woolbury Fiber Co. So I have sock sets from that entire club, and I've also acquired a couple other skeins of tonals from that collection that I got secondhand afterwards so that I could make a blanket. This is not technically a book project because the Pride and Prejudice yarn is specifically based off of the 2005 movie, but I was excited about watching the movie again. I was just in the mood. I was excited about this yarn club and I was excited about rereading the book, and that's kind of where this whole video idea came from. So I just wanted to show you the yarns that I do have set aside. I would love to get like 1 to 2 more skeins. I'm looking on Ravelry for destashes and things just to see if I can get a little bit more yarn that's in the Pride and Prejudice club realm so that I can cast on a project that I have in mind. And I could probably make do with what I have. I have 1 other skein of Woolbury Fabric Co. that I might use to supplement what I have already if I can't find any more Pride and Prejudice yarn. But here's what I have. I've got this whole little bin full of these sock sets. And then I also have, this is a skein of Woolbury that is the colorway Austen. I thought, even though it's not part of this collection, it fits mood-wise and concept-wise. Also, this skein is called October. I think technically it is inspired by Anne of Green Gables. At least in my brain, that's what it's inspired by. I don't know if that's what Bethany was thinking, but thematically, it looks like it would fit in with these colors. So I've thrown this in here. Wanted to show you, I have those set aside, some really nice colors. I'm really excited about working on this project. And again, not technically a book blanket because it's inspired by a movie, but the movie was inspired by a book. So it's kind of book blanket adjacent. I did mention though, I want to knit a pair of socks. I'm in the mood for something fun, easy stockinette. I do have other Pride and Prejudice themed yarn, and I have this skein already wound up, so I should just cast this on. And I figured I would include it in this video because it is related to Pride and Prejudice, and to just have a little bit of a knitting project thrown in there in the midst of reading all these books. I have it set aside in a bag because I've been wanting to cast this on for a while. This is from Nomadic Yarns. It is the Bennett Sisters colorway in their twisty sock base, which is an 80% superwash merino and 20% nylon. And I've not worked with self-striping yarn in a minute since I did the Desert Vista Dye Works like monthly challenge where you would knit with their yarn every single month, and I did that for 18 months straight. So I haven't worked on a self-striping project since then. I kind of got burned out, I guess. I worked really hard at making sure that I had entries for that, and I'm in the mood right now. So this is the Bennett Sisters colorway. I love this, like kind of like a dark periwinkle purpley blue. There's like this rosy pink. There's a light silver in there. There's an olive green. Then there's this like pistachio green almost. It's just a really fun group of colors. And to go with it, I ordered a mini from Nomadic Yarns. And this is in the olive colorway. So I have a 20-gram mini to go with a 50-gram main skein. So my thought for this was to make some shorty socks. But yeah, I have like piles of needles to clean up after my last sock project, and I have this yarn already ready to go, so I'm just gonna cast on because I am in the mood for a stockinette in the round kind of project. I have run into an issue I did not foresee because I just cast it on willy-nilly. Okay, so I have done 6 rounds of this ribbing. I'm getting close to finishing this cute pink color, but then it's olive green next. And I was just about ready to, or I was at least considering going on to the heel from here, but that will not look good to have an olive green stripe right next to an olive green heel. So that means I have to at least go one more stripe beyond the olive green. So it's gonna be a longer cuff than I anticipated. But the good thing is that these stripes, they're smaller stripes than I'm used to from Desert Vista Dye Works. So hopefully my cuff is not gonna be too long. Maybe like 15 rounds, which might be perfect, honestly. And then moving on to the heel. So I need to knit a bit longer on this cuff before I can join in my heel yarn. I think I'm gonna do a heel flap and gusset because I know it'll fit better, and if it fits better, I know I'll wear it more. Hello. I am just checking in on how Pride and Prejudice and Zombies is going. I'm about 25 to 30% of the way done, and it's kind of dragging. I have some conflicting feelings about this book. I've been reading on my Kindle, and I got it from my library, and I've already had to renew it because I'm just really reading it at bedtime, so reading a couple short chapters before I go to sleep kind of thing. And while the joke of zombies in Pride and Prejudice is funny, and there are some lines that literally make me laugh because they catch me off guard, the joke is getting really stale already. I have like 200 pages left of this book, so I'm not sure how I feel about it. I'll probably keep going just because it's an easy read since I'm so familiar with the story. and I'm really hoping that things get interesting. Really, the only thing that makes Pride and Prejudice and Zombies different from the original Pride and Prejudice is moments of like fighting zombies and talking about fighting zombies, but there's so much pulled from the original story that it's just feeling a little bit unoriginal and unimaginative, whereas other remixes or iterations of the Pride and Prejudice classic story have deviated from the classic so that they've at least been an interesting concept, something different than what I'm used to. Yeah, I don't know. I also feel like maybe I'm not the best person to talk about this, but I feel like it's kind of racist. The Bennett sisters have received some training for fighting zombies, but the tone that is talked about just makes me feel kind of uncomfortable. They're talking about going to the Shaolin province and like working in a dojo and like learning from Grandmaster whoever, and it just feels like it's not honoring that culture and it's more just adding to the joke. I don't know, it makes me a little bit uncomfortable, and I don't know if that's like a true issue or not, or if I'm just reading into it too much. So let me know if you have any opinions about that. It's making me feel not like super great, but that's also not often mentioned. So I just don't know how I feel about it. Also, for some reason, this author, Seth Grahame-Smith or whoever, is obsessed with talking about Mr. Collins and how he's fat. And again, it's one of those things that just feels like unnecessary. Why is this the thing that is changed from the original where they're obsessed with Mr. Collins being fat? Because being fat is not a moral issue, and it just feels like it's so much of a focus. Yeah, I don't know how I feel about it. But yeah, we're 30% of the way through. We might keep going. I might bail out. I don't know. Am I gonna get anything new out of continuing to read this book? Part of me feels like maybe not. Hello friends, wanted to give you an update. So last time I chatted with you, I was reading on my Kindle Pride and Prejudice and Zombies. I wasn't sure if I should continue or DNF the book. After talking through my feelings, I realized that I needed to DNF that book. So I did. I stopped at about the 30% mark. I just felt like I wasn't going to get anything else out of it. There were some things that made me feel a little bit uncomfortable, and it didn't feel original or like it was adding anything to the concept as the book went along. So that was a DNF, but I have another book that I started and then soft DNF. I am just in like the worst reading slump right now. So the book that I started and I'm soft DNFing is The Murder of Mr. Wickham by Claudia Gray. I've had this book recommended to me, and I thought it would be fun talking about cozy murder mystery of Mr. Wickham, including characters from Jane Austen's books. And it took me so long to get through the first chapter. It was not holding my attention. I was reading it on Kindle right before bed. So I think just with me being in a slumpy mood and reading on my Kindle right before bed, it was just like not a good combo. So I did make it through the first chapter, but I was like, you know what, this isn't gonna work. I am going to do the audiobook and I will get through this a lot faster. It'll hold my attention better. It'll be a book that I read at a different time of day, so I'll be able to focus more when I'm reading it. So I need to find something nice and easy to read on my Kindle right before bed, but this was not it. And after having read a few books that were set in like Jane Austen time period, one after the other, I just needed something that was a little bit easier on my brain rather than older English language, if that makes sense. Another thing is that with this book, there are characters from all of Jane Austen's books, and I've only read Emma and Pride and Prejudice. And while I'm familiar with both of those stories, the rest of them I really don't know anything about. So I think I'm still gonna read it because I think I'll still enjoy it, because this book takes place after all of her books take place. And so I don't think it's going to impact my reading of her original works, but I wonder if I would get more out of the characters or maybe understand the characters a little bit more if I had already read all of her other works. But for right now, I feel like this author's doing a good job at telling the story of these characters, introducing them, showing how different each of them is. And so I do want to read this, and I'm excited to find out about Mr. Wickham's murder, but I just can't do it on Kindle. I did take a break from this video because I've just been so slumpy. I'm trying to think of what I want to get back to, and I don't think I'm going to make it through all the books I had on my potential list, but I do want to prioritize, I think, after reading a handful of Pride and Prejudice related stories.
I want to read a book by a person of color, and I would like to read a book that is set in modern times because all the other books for the bulk of it was in 1810s. So I would love a story that is more applicable to my modern life. So I'm trying to think of which book or 2 books I want to read to kind of finish off this vlog and hit those marks just for some variety's sake. So I'm going to be thinking about that, and we'll come back to that, and I'll introduce the next book I read pretty soon, hopefully. All right, a few updates. I've been working on my summer advent project. I have a ways to go, but this has been good to work on while I've been doing some audiobooks. Updates about that. I decided I am for sure gonna DNF The Murder of Mr. Wickham. I guess it became much more clear as I was continuing on in that book via audio that I really don't know most of these characters. And while I think I would enjoy the book and it would be fine, I am getting a lot less out of it because I've only read 2 of Jane Austen's novels. So I think I need to table that until I read the rest of her works to have a better understanding of those characters and gain hopefully a better appreciation for what Claudia Gray is doing with rewriting these stories and continuing these stories of these characters. That's kind of a bummer. I was hoping to be able to knock that book off my TBR list because that is a book that I actually own because my mom recommended it to me, but I just feel like right now is not the season. I did pick another book up, and I think this is going to be my last book of the video. This is Pride and Protest by Nikki Payne. It was not the longest book that I had an option for. I didn't have to wait longer for a hold, so it just worked out really well. Plus, it is written by a person of color, and it takes place in the modern world, which is different than all the other books in the series. And so that was something that was appealing to me. I just wanted something different. This book is really different because it takes place in, is it Harlem or some kind of community like that where there are a lot of minorities and they have some beef with the white capitalists in society. Rightly so. There's some gentrification going on. The corporation that Dorsey, our Darcy character, is the acting CEO, I think, of this company who is trying to buy out a block of buildings to tear down those apartments and build high-rise apartments and luxury type businesses, trying to effectively pricing out the people who have been living in that neighborhood for a really long time. And so there's some really interesting ethical questions that are raised for the reader, which I really like. I like that we're talking about this gentrification and capitalism. We've met, what's her name? The Elizabeth Bennet character is named Lisa, I think. So both of their names are kind of butchered a little bit, making it different, but very clearly these are our 2 main characters. They are at odds, they don't see eye to eye, and I'm not too far into this, so we'll see kind of how their dynamic plays out. I don't know, I'm kind of interested to see where the author takes this. I will say, Dorsey is Filipino. He is adopted, but he's 6'2" or 6'3" or something crazy like that, and I just had a hard time suspending my disbelief that there is a random Filipino guy who just happens to be super tall. After a while, the author did mention it, but it took a while for the author to mention that he was freakishly tall for a Filipino. And then our female main character is a DJ, but she is very much in the political activism type scene as she's trying to fight this corporation and lead protests and things like that, which is really fun. I am not necessarily connecting with either of these characters very much, but it's still early on, so we'll see kind of how they grow on me. Hopefully this is a good one. I really hope that I enjoy this book. Hello. We've got our visitor Alfred, and I have finished Pride and Protest by Nikki Payne. Was this my least favorite book that I finished in this video? Maybe. It's gonna be somewhere in the low 3-star zone for me. So I liked the premise and having a modern retelling because there's not a ton of modern retellings. A lot of the retellings I've read have been harking back to the 1800s. So I really liked that it was modern, had some modern issues
that it discussed. I had a hard time connecting with these characters. I just didn't necessarily like either of them. They weren't inherently unlikable, but none of them were inherently likable either for me. I just had a hard time, connecting with them, connecting with the romance that they had. I just couldn't get completely on board. I also, well, I liked the topic of gentrification and this corporation buying out this neighborhood area. I feel like that didn't really show up in the plot very much. I would have loved more of that kind of detail to make it a deeper meaning to the book, because this book just ended up being really, really shallow and superficial in my opinion. I also felt like there were some scenes, like moments thrown into this book that just like didn't make sense. The Mr. Collins character asking the Lizzie character to marry him, and it just felt really weird. It did not fit with like the rest of the story, if that makes sense, or how the Bennett family, I can't remember their actual name in the story, but how the Bennett family ended up showing up at a ball with some high class people. It just felt really weird. It didn't quite flow cohesively, in my opinion. I think something that bugged me the most might have been the fact that the Lizzie character, what was her name? Lisa B, I think. She would quote Jane Austen, like use old English terminology. She would speak like she was from the early 1800s. And then in the same page, you would hear some really crass discussion about relationship stuff. The dissonance between them speaking really, really, really informally versus them quoting Jane Austen didn't suit me. It didn't fit me in what I like. It just felt kind of weird. Some people might enjoy this book. It was a bit too horny for me. Not really an emotional relationship between these two characters. Not as much like emotional pining or feeling drawn to each other emotionally. Definitely more on the lusty, horny side. It was fine, I guess, but it wasn't for me. It might be for somebody else. And the things I was excited about for this book just didn't really show up to the extent that I anticipated. We'll talk more about that in the conclusion, but that's how this book went. And I think I'm done for now reading Pride and Prejudice retellings. So the next time you'll see me, we'll hopefully be finishing up this video and kind of drawing conclusions from this whole Pride and Prejudice extravaganza. It is another day, and it is a nice gloomy, almost rainy day. I live in Utah. It doesn't rain a lot, unfortunately. It makes me very sad, but we're getting like little sprinklings throughout the day here. I wanted to show you my progress on my Pride and Prejudice shorty socks. I was able to get a little bit done at work yesterday, which I showed already. Ta-da! This marker is where I finished the gusset. So I've done maybe like 10 rounds past that. My foot length for a stockinette sock that I typically knit will be somewhere between 40 and 45 rounds beyond the gusset. I've got a little ways to go, but I do have an appointment today. And so with the drive time, because I'm passenger princess, and with like waiting for my appointment, I'm hoping I can get a lot more done on this. But I am actually really, really happy with how these are turning out. I made the right call, I think, in knitting 2 colors past that like olivey green and then adding in my heel, because then there's 2 more colors on the gusset before I get back to that olivey green. And I misspoke. This color, the mini skein, is actually called Thyme. It's not called Olive, from Nomadic Yarns. But it matches perfectly. So cute. I'm really liking this. Even though the cuff was a little bit longer than I had originally planned for, I think I'll still really like the fit. And I like how the color play is going. I also noticed that this colorway has 5 separate colors. And so my thought was 1 color per Bennett sister, because there are 5 sisters. What colors do you think go with which sister? We're gonna think about this. Do we think they're in order from like Jane, Lizzie, Mary, like that? Let me know what you think. Whose color is whose for the 5 Bennett sisters. But I'm gonna knit on this a little bit more before my appointment. Just gonna relax in the gloomy, cloudy day that we're having. See how much progress I can make. I really wanna get these socks done pretty quickly. So I'm gonna try to power through because I just am enjoying this kind of a small stockinette project. All right, one sock done. Awesome, and another sock started. So we're gonna get this pair done pretty quickly. I wanted to close out this video and talk about the things that I experienced, and especially the books that I read and my thoughts and feelings about them, and kind of what I want to take from this experiment of reading a whole bunch of Pride and Prejudice retellings. But first, let's talk about the fun things I did. I rewatched the 2005 Pride and Prejudice, the one with Keira Knightley, and while it's not my favorite adaptation, it's definitely not as historically accurate, and I just feel like Keira Knightley feels too modern. Maybe it's the way that she portrays the character. It's not ideal, but there's things that I love about it. Donald Sutherland, of course, so good, and at the very end, the tenderness that he feels toward Lizzie is just so special. I love Matthew McFadden, and the scene of him like walking across the moors. Oh, it's so stunning. So there's definitely some moments. I think that the strengths of that movie are its artistic element and just the general vibes and artistry of it. I feel like it focuses a lot more on the feelings that you feel rather than what it's actually portraying. And so a lot of the costumes and hair and makeup and even the way some of these characters interact are not as historically accurate as other adaptations. I would love to go back and watch the BBC miniseries because I love that adaptation, but it's just so long. I'm gonna have to piecemeal my time working on that. But I really had a fun time watching it, and my sister-in-law watched it for the first time with me. So that was really fun too. I also worked on this Jane Austen puzzle, which is so fun. And I honestly don't work on 1,000-piece puzzles very often. I really liked, it's got lots of regionally related things. And while there's a couple elements that I'm like, oh, I can kind of think of where that came from in Jane Austen's world, a lot of these are just the vibe of Regency era, though I'm sure if I had read more of Jane Austen's books by now, I would see more Easter eggs. My husband helped me finish it up, which was so fun to be able to do that together. And then I was able to knit a pair of socks, and I'm really happy with how they turned out. This is a pair of shorties using nomadic yarns. Ta-da! This colorway is called Bennett Sisters, and the mini is called Time. I did say that wrong earlier on in this video. So cute. I just really wanted to cast these on for a while. And so when I was in the middle of filming this video, I was struck with inspiration, and I was like, yes, my yarn's already ready. I should just cast these on because they fit the theme. So I did that, and I'm really happy with how they turned out. I did cuff down. I did have some issues with color play that I had to kind of work around. So there are 5 color stripes in here. And because I only had a 50-gram mini, I had to work around how much yarn I had. I didn't want to run out. That would have made me so sad. So I just started knitting wherever the skein started, at least at a color change is where I started. So on this gray. And then I realized I had this like olive green color right there towards the very end of my cuff. I didn't want this to bleed into the heel, and so I needed to knit a little bit farther after that. So I made the cuff a little bit longer than I had originally intended, but it ends up being that I have about 2 color stripes before the heel, and then 2 color stripes after the heel in between these olive stripes and the olive colored heel. So I'm really happy. I feel like the symmetry actually works better than I had originally intended. It worked out just fine. And same thing on the toe. It worked out that I have about 2 color stripes on the toe after the last olive stripe and before the olive colored toe. So symmetrically, they work way better than I expected. I just did a 2x2 rib on my cuff, 64 stitches. I just used my typical US 1 2.25 ChiaoGoo metal needles. I did a German twisted cast on, I just knit my cuff, and then on the very front of my sock, I knit straight. So I stopped doing the ribbing, and then I joined in my yarn for my heel, did a heel flap and gusset. Nothing crazy with the shaping there, just a traditional heel flap and gusset for a 64 stitch count sock. And then I just knit until I had it long enough. So yeah, super happy with how these turned out. I wrote down how much yarn I have left, and it's not a lot, and my socks match, which I really wanted to prioritize. I could have been a little less finicky with the color striping, but I am really happy that they are matching and that I had yarn to make that work. So I had 9 grams left of my main color in the main ball, though I had wound off 2 grams of striping that I didn't need prior to starting my second sock so that they would match. So 11 grams total left over, and then I have 7 grams left of my contrast color. Not a ton of scraps, I'll just add them to my scrap bin. I talked about this earlier in my video, but there are 5 stripes, and I was trying to think of who each stripe represents. Okay, so here is my idea, but let me know if you feel differently. I think that the pink is Jane, the fairest color of them all, and then I'm basing it off of the order that I knit them in. So I guess if we hold my sock this way, so pink is first, that's Jane. The second would be Lizzie. She's olive toned, definitely more down to earth, earthy kind of girl, especially when you look at the 2005 version of the movie. The third one is Mary, this like really fun periwinkle, and I think she just stands out, not necessarily in the best way in this era, in the Regency era, and in the community that she lives in, but she does stand out, I feel like, and so I thought that that purple was good for her. The gray is for Kitty. She kind of is left by the wayside, and she really is only a character in conjunction with Lydia, and so there's not a lot to her. She's just kind of following the crowd. She's a gray. And then this pale green is gonna be Lydia. So that's my thoughts on which color represents which sister, but let me know if you feel differently. I think it's just fun to consider. I don't even know if that's what the dyer had in mind with dyeing this colorway, but I love these colors together. A little bit unexpected, but still super, super cute. Let's talk about the books I read. I already kind of talked about my thoughts and feelings throughout the reading process, so I'm just gonna do a quick kind of wrap up of my thoughts and my final rating of these books. And if you want to hear me talk more about them besides this vlog, I do have reading videos that I publish every single month on the things that I read in the month and kind of giving my more in-depth reviews. So if you want to learn more, you can always head over to those reading videos. Okay, first and foremost, I had to reread Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. I rated this a 4.5 star. I've never rated it in the past because it has been a really long time since I read it, but I think this is my 3rd time reading it, and I did the audiobook. I had such a fun time. I thoroughly enjoyed myself. Because I am familiar with the story, familiar with the characters, I was able to pick up on a lot of subtleties with the humor and the banter. I always appreciate the drama and the like societal tensions that are not overly dramatic, but definitely show the reality of the drama of the time, I feel like. And so I really appreciated that, and I just had a fun time revisiting the story. And while when I was younger, I felt like it was kind of a longer book, it didn't feel long at all to me in this time reading. I will say, it was not a perfect story. I really wish that we got a little bit more of Darcy's perspective as he is changing and growing and becoming a better person throughout the course of the story. We get little glimpses of him, but because it's a Lizzie-centered story, we just miss out a little bit on Darcy's growth, and I just wish we had a little bit more of that. But overall, such a good book. I am in general a fan of romance, but I love how this book is so much more than a romance and really delves into who these characters are and how they interact with one another and how they see the world around them. I thoroughly enjoy both Emma and Pride and Prejudice, so I definitely need to read more from Jane Austen. The next book that I read was Pride and Premeditation by Tirzah Price, and this is a YA mystery set in the 1820s, but with some anachronisms that made it feel a little bit more like a Penny Dreadful 1860s to 1880s type of a book. These characters now live in London, and Lizzie is a teenager. She wants to work with her father as a solicitor or barrister, something in the legal realm in this day and age. And while there are definitely some parts of this book that are not historically accurate for good reason. The author specifically mentions that in their author note. They did it intentionally. This was just really, really fun. And I feel like of all the other retellings I read, this one did the best job at capturing the characters and transporting these characters into a new setting, a new environment, and how that would alter the story, because the characters aren't going to be exactly the same if they are in a completely new setting. But they felt familiar still. I think this author did a really good job at doing a character study of the original characters and using that characterization for her characters in her book. So I really appreciated that. Like I said, you kind of need to suspend your disbelief because it's just a little bit cracktastic of a story, very Penny Dreadfully, gets very dramatic. There's a lot of moments where I'm like, that would not happen. It's not realistic, but it is a fun time. I rated this a 4.25 star, and it's part of a series. I'm looking forward to reading more, though I'm not sure how much of the exciting plot points in the end of this story are being carried through the series versus things are a little bit more standalone, since each of the books in the series are inspired by a different novel by Jane Austen. So we'll have to wait and see, but I had a fun time and it was just like a silly, goofy time. So I definitely recommend this one if you're not too hung up about historical accuracy. The next book that I read was totally a dud. This was Pride and Prejudice in Pittsburgh by Rachael Lippincott. This was also a YA, and I thought this would be perfect for the video, and it had nothing to do with Pride and Prejudice. So, while I like the story, we're not gonna talk about that. So if you wanna learn more about that, check out my reading wrap up for the month that I read this story, but we're gonna move on to something more related to this video. The next book I read, again, another YA. This is Most Ardently by Gabe Novoa, and I rated this a 3.75. I did not like this quite as much as the previous books, but I felt like there were some really strong aspects that makes me want to recommend this to almost anyone, because I feel like it's an important story to tell. This book does take place in the 1800s, but it's a very different perspective because, again, the Bennet family, they're more in London society. They're not on the outskirts in this small town as much. And so there are different events that happen. There's like some fair that goes on. Our main character does a lot of like walking around and exploring the area. It just feels very different because it's a different setting. Our main character, I think his name is Oliver, but while born a female, he identifies as a male, and while he's come out to a couple people, he's still navigating that transition period of coming to terms with who he is in relation to everyone else in his life, especially when a lot of people don't know how he feels and what makes him most comfortable. So he's just kind of navigating that. So I think this is a really great YA story. It's really pertinent for us to be learning about trans stories and appreciating the struggles of identity and belonging that they go through, because I feel like everyone, even those who are not trans, struggle with that. And so that's something that cisgender people can understand a little bit better and empathize with those who are trans, and hopefully create a safer and more welcoming space for those who are trans. So I feel like this was a really poignant story about that experience, and I really appreciated that. I felt like I would have enjoyed this story and some of the plot points would have made more sense if this wasn't a YA, but it was in fact an adult novel. I just felt like there were some ways that the author was trying too hard to make this a YA story when it would have flowed a little bit better for an adult audience. I wanted a little bit more romance from the Darcy Oliver scenario. I felt like some of the plot points just felt a little bit awkward and how the story was told. So while emotionally I feel like this was a really great story, there were just some things storytelling wise that didn't quite hit for me, but I still really enjoyed it. Like I said, I really recommend this book. The next book that I read was a DNF, and this was Pride, Prejudice, and Zombies. It says by Jane Austen and Seth Grahame-Smith. This was a weird ride. So if you haven't read this before, basically Seth Grahame-Smith took actual quotations and descriptions and storylines directly from Jane Austen, and he embellished it with zombies. So the Bennet sisters are trained to fight zombies. There are zombies running around the neighborhood. They hear about people getting eaten. It's just like a very weird time. I thought it would be really funny, and it was funny at first, but the joke got really stale really quickly because it didn't really evolve or change or bring anything new or unexpected that I was looking for. And so that was kind of, I don't know, made it not very fun. And even though it's not a long book, I just had a hard time continuing on. It became a slog. And then it just felt like there was a lot of like subtly racist comments that made me kind of uncomfortable. This book also had some comments about like Mr. Collins being fat, and it was very obsessed with that descriptor. And that also felt very derogatory. So there was just some things that felt, some able-bodied cis white man wrote this and it wasn't very sensitive. So I decided to DNF. I was about 30% of the way into the book, if I remember correctly. I would not recommend this. It's like funny for a chapter and then it was not funny. So if you've read that book, let me know what your thoughts are, because it felt a little bit like, am I reading what other people are reading? Like, am I supposed to be getting something different out of this? But I decided that I would be better off just leaving it in the dust. I do not need to finish it. I will never go back to that book. The next book I had though is another DNF, but a soft DNF. This is one I do hope to come back to. And this is The Murder of Mr. Wickham by Claudia Gray. This book is a murder mystery that takes all these characters from all the Jane Austen novels and plucks them out of the end of their stories in relation to one another, because they don't all happen in the same year of time. And they all know each other like in their future after all these stories have concluded, and they gather together at the Knightley's estate, if I remember correctly. I only got a couple chapters in, but I guess Mr. Wickham is murdered, which I'm not bothered by. But the reason I decided to soft DNF this is because I've only, again, read 2 of Jane Austen's novels, and there are 3 or 4 others. I think there's 3 others that she has that I really want to read. And I feel like I will get so much more out of that story if I understand these characters and where they came from. I think I'll just pick up more Easter eggs. I'll have a more fun time. I don't think it's necessary to read all of Jane Austen's works before reading this book, but I do think it will enhance my experience. And so that's what I'm choosing to do. So I put it back on my shelf. I'll come back to it another time when I feel more comfortable with the backstories of these characters so that I can, hopefully get more out of it. And the last book that I read in this video is Pride and Protest by Nikki Payne. If we don't count Pride Prejudice and Zombies, this was my least favorite book that I finished. I rated it a 3.25 star. And what I really liked about this book, what I was looking for, it's written by a BIPOC author and involves a lot of diversity in the story itself. It is a modern retelling, unlike the others, so that was something different that I was really looking for when I was trying to select my last book to read. I also liked that it talked about, the capitalist system and gentrification and topics like that are really important in our day and age, and especially concerning people of color and what corporations are doing to them. I just didn't quite connect with this book. I feel like I didn't quite get the characters. They didn't connect with me in the same way that some others did. I just felt a little friction between myself and the characters and like trying to understand them and their motivations and trying to get behind their choices. I just had a hard time kind of totally embracing the characters, and especially their love story. It felt kind of insta-lovey. It felt lusty. It felt horny. So it wasn't for me. I really like more of an emotional romance, and I don't mind spicy things in my stories, but I just need a little bit more emotional connection between my characters to progress the story, and I felt like that was lacking in this book. I also felt like there was some weird duality in the way that these characters talked, especially the female main character, where she would basically quote Jane Austen, and then in the next paragraph, she would start dropping slang and talking about inappropriate things. Like, it was just really weird, and I just wasn't vibing with the writing style, if that makes sense. It just wasn't for me. I could definitely see some people really enjoying this book and liking a pretty rom-com-y type of a book, but I was hoping that there would be a lot more depth in this topic of like the gentrification, this corporation trying to buy out these apartments for lower incomes and turning it into high rises. I just wanted more about that meat of the story, and I really didn't get as much as I was hoping. In looking at all of these books, my readings went down throughout. And I don't know, not that I was looking for a Pride and Prejudice retelling that I liked better than the original, but it was a little bit disappointing that things just got farther and farther from what I was looking for. So kind of looking at all of these retellings and what I love about the original Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen, I tried to decide what am I looking for in a retelling, because I don't think I found my perfect retelling. I found a couple really fun books, and I found some that did some creative things that I really enjoyed, but nothing that really gave me what I was looking for. So, in trying to figure out what I'm looking for, I really loved the stories that were true to the nature of these characters, whether these characters were in a similar circumstance or not to the original story. I wanted to feel like I already know these characters, and that is exactly how I feel they would act in this scenario, even though it is a different story than the original. That's really what I like in a retelling, is feeling like I already know these characters and I already love them and I understand them, and that maybe this retelling adds more depth and understanding to the characters, where I can then go back and read the original and feel like I understand the original better than I did before because of this retelling kind of adding to my viewpoint of the character, if that makes sense. And maybe that's a lot to ask for, but I want my retellings to enhance my read of the original story. And I think I am really looking for a unique story that feels very different than the original, that doesn't feel like it's just copy and paste a lot of things, but still has a lot of themes and parallels and Easter eggs that feel very intentional and like they are contributing to this new and unique story. It's sometimes fun to just read a retelling, a different way of showing the story, of talking about these characters. I don't know, there's a reason people love fanfic, right? But I'm looking for a little bit more depth in the storytelling that's really going to enhance my read of the classic. So if you have any Pride and Prejudice retellings that you absolutely adore, please let me know down below, because I would love to continue this video, since now I have a costume, and hopefully I will practice my hair some more. Maybe I will even get bangs. So I would love to be able to do like a part 2 to this video, read some more Pride and Prejudice retellings. There's definitely a couple retellings I know about that I didn't get a chance to read. And I feel like there's more that keep cropping up. Maybe I'll watch the BBC miniseries. I don't know, like there's definitely some room for doing a part 2, but I need some recommendations, because none of these retellings quite hit the way I was hoping, though some of them did do some special things that make me want to recommend them to you. So let me know if you've read any of these books or if you're adding any of these to your TBR. Thank you so much for being here and watching this video. I really appreciate you. If you like this type of content where I talk about reading vlogs, knitting vlogs, everything that I am reading and making, then definitely make sure to subscribe and hit the bell notification to be notified every time I post a new video. And let me know if there's anything else you want to see from me. This kind of fun experiential vlog was different than what I normally do, but I really like watching these types of vlogs, so I wanted to give it a try. Let me know if there's anything else you'd want to see from me. And until next time, happy reading. Bye.